Quantum Physics 101 continued. I'm just going to move my chair so it's facing the door, thanks, I said. Better to ask for forgiveness than permission, right? I dragged the chair behind me to the back wall and turned it to face the door. Much better. Perfect. I smiled broadly at everyone as I sat back down. I removed the lens and case from the bag and set them firmly on my lap. I was as ready as I was ever going to be. It seemed like only moments before Miss Thorne reappeared in the doorway. She seemed confused for a moment when she saw me watching her from across the room. I watched her mouth twitch and thought, is that what smiles look like around here? I firmly kept my eyes from rolling up to the ceiling. I'd made my statement. No need to irritate possible allies. I was sure I was going to need allies. I thought Detective Lucero might be an ally. Officer Wilkins, too. Officer Farley. I wasn't too sure about him. I shouldn't even wonder about Miss Thorne. I'd already pissed her off today. Ally was probably not a good adjective for her at this point. Miss Thorne came back, a small test tube rack with 2 sealed vials that held some dark red material in one hand and something wrapped in a sterile bandage in the other hand. I watched her approach with some ease. Can you hand me your slides? Please. I opened the case and removed the lens, placing the empty case on the chair next to me and the lid on my lap. I removed the slides and tucked the lens firmly against my belly, gently disengaging one slide from the black holder and setting it on the lid in my lap. Just put your sample on this slide. I've watched enough TV crime shows. I used to have a microscope and science kit when I was a kid. I took a science class in high school. I know what to do. Do you then? Miss Thorne glanced at me briefly. All right. Detective, can you give me a hand here? I watched as she handed Detective Lucero the test tube holder, which he accepted gingerly, holding it out and away from him. Miss Thorne removed one vial from the rack with one hand and shook an eyedropper from the sterile cloth in one smooth motion with the other hand, letting the empty wrapping drop to the empty chair. Pulling the stopper from the vial with the palm of her hand, she dipped the eyedropper into the vial, then leaned over and let one drop fall silently on the glass slide. She quickly emptied the dropper back into the vial and closed it, setting it back into the holder as she rolled the dropper up in the sterile pad and sat down quickly in her chair to face me. I had waited to put the second glass slide on the sample until Miss Thorne was watching. I removed the second glass slide from its holder, holding it carefully with 2 fingertips on the outer edges, and gently lowered it onto the first slide, watching as the pale red circle immediately expanded into a larger, even paler red circle. I felt every single eye in that room avidly fixed on my hands. I willed them to stillness and, as carefully as possible, picked the 2 slides up together and slid them into the bracket, pushing them firmly into place. With another deep breath, I picked up the lens and turned it so the slot for the glass slides was facing sideways. Gently inserting the glass slides and bracket into the lens, I felt a click from inside the lens and looked up quickly at Officer Wilkins. He'd heard it too. He was sitting close enough to me to have heard it and caught it. No one else seemed to, though. Their eyes were still on the lens I held in my hands as Officer Wilkins and I shared a look that seemed to go on forever. I blinked and my eyes came back to focus on the lens. Now what? I take a deep breath and, swallowing hard, I began, all right, I think we're all set. Let me think for a moment, okay? I saw heads nod in my peripheral vision as I continued to look at the lens, waiting for a sign or some clue to tell me what to do next. A few seconds passed, but no amazing thought or divine inspiration came to me. Great. I continued. I know how to operate the lens, kind of. I know the mechanics of what I'm supposed to do, at least. We talked about that the first time I came to see you. I found myself talking to Officer Wilkins directly. I'll hold it up to my forehead, just here between and above the center brow line. The case lid will be a platform for whatever is going to happen. So I will need to put the lid on the center of the floor. I leaned forward and stood up halfway, taking a half step forward as I set the lid carefully on the floor in front of me. I backed away, sitting into my chair once again. Now what? Again, I was fast running out of ideas. I didn't think there was anything else I needed to do except just to get on with it. Great. Okay, so that's it. Then I think we're ready. I'm ready. Maybe. I don't know. I'm a little nervous here, truthfully. I smiled hopefully at Miss Thorne. Maybe I could win her back to my side with charm, or at least pitifulness. Her gaze was totally noncommittal. I felt a hand briefly touch my left shoulder and glanced at Officer Wilkins. He smiled at me and nodded. Go for it. I took a deep breath, nodded at him with a smile, and closed my eyes. Blood speaks. They eagerly waited a release, their specific function and purpose now being fulfilled. Their services were no longer wanted or needed, so they waited. There was no time. There was no space. There was only waiting. Suddenly, an opening! Without delay, they proceeded at a steady and consistent rate, passing through the portal into freedom. More openings revealed themselves, and the flow continued for some time, before slowly abating. Freedom! Oh, glorious day! They danced in delight, reveling in movement after so long a forced stasis. Some leapt into the air, joining with those whirling weightless around them, spiraling into a never-ending glory of joy and exuberance. Some sank deep into the earth, joining crystalline partners in a slow ballet, becoming one. They were all transformed in that moment. Some cells began the process of oxidation, evaporating immediately upon exiting the wounds. Other cells soaked deep into the soil, starting the process of decomposition in combination with the surrounding minerals. The torso, shorn of head and limbs, bled out, leaving a quickly coagulating pool of blood around and beneath it.